Hey, everyone. Yeah, we can go ahead and get started. Let me make sure I'm recording this time. Just give me a moment. All right. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Nice. Okay. Yes, so this is the April community call, or actually the March one. That's just a little bit late. We can go ahead and get started here. So with Chica, we're going to be launching version 1.2.0. A couple of fixes. There's the wallet reset flow. This allows the wallet to be reset in a more secure way. Also, the files that were managed are now properly deleted and cleared and restored in the right way. Also, there was an issue with how the application was closing. Because in the back end, the wallet has like a process that it's running. And if that process is still running and you try to open the app, it will crash. So we make sure to clean up that like dangling process there. Part of the thing that's going on now is testing on all of the desktop platforms for that version. That's going on now. Yeah, it's on GitHub. Feel free to help with that if you want. And then also deploy that new version after we do some testing with it. On my Wit wallet, we have some new features. One of them is time lock transactions. So when you send a value transfer, you can now set a time before that transaction's spendable. Which is nice, and we updated the UI to reflect that. So in the transaction list, you'll see a little lock icon and the transaction detail that shows every UTXO in that transaction. You can see which one is locked or if it's unlocked as well. Some enhancements, API compatibility. This is kind of the integration with the Explorer. That's the API I'm referring to here. It does the check for the version of the Explorer to make sure that it's the correct version. We also updated Witnet Dart, which is kind of the back end. There's like several updates in there. Also, database migration. This is an interesting thing, right? So when we release new versions of my Wit wallet, sometimes the database structure or how we handle the database is updated. So when installing a new version, we need to migrate the database, and that is now handled through versioning as well. Some things under review, the UI for the redesign of transactions. This is part of the new branding thing that we've been going over for a while now. It's finally time to start incorporating them into the products, like the wallets, the website, the Data Feeds Explorer. There's also a new review for Witnet.Dart. Part of this is moving some of the functionality of signing transactions and choosing change addresses and stuff to the Witnet.Dart package to make Witnet.Dart more of like a standalone kind of package that anyone can use to try to increase the usability of that outside of just for my Wit wallet. And also, there is a thing that when we migrate the database, some of the transactions might not be displayed properly, or it's missing some information with the new structure of the Explorer API. But we can kind of derive that information from what we already have. So during a database migration, it's all local. It doesn't reach out to the Explorer to do any like resyncing of transactions or anything. So that's a big load, especially when some wallets have like thousands of transactions, right? Like that could take some time. So yeah, that's a new feature there, or it's under review. Now, kind of to the meat of the call here. On Witnet Rust, we have a couple of eligibility enhancements. So the mining and witnessing eligibility functions were integrated, and we have also merged some JSON RPC and CLI methods, specifically with staking. This allows, JSON RPC, right? Data reporting. In the retrievals, part of this is the retrieval time and rate on the timestamp is now included. This has been one of the things about logging the actual timestamp. This is not this is the timestamp of the retrieval, but also I think it's more of the commit and how that is relayed back to the chain that initiated the call. On the strategic portion, this is more about the WIP that we just seen released. So there were a few emission curves in discussion, and we kind of narrowed it down to 2 for the WIP. On the coin issuance, it's more of we need to decide on a specific curve. We need to decide on a coin issuance for the release of WIT 2, and then we can reassess that as needed moving forward. The block reward deduction, this is decreasing to 125 WIT. This is just clearly what's stated in the WIP. I know there's been some discussion on the reward and also the block time. As you can see under the testing, it's 22 seconds, but maybe 20 seconds can work, and maybe we could reduce that block reward a little bit more. I know maybe Dr. CPU is in favor of 50 WIT per 20 seconds. So there's a lot of discussion around that, which is exciting to see. Some future plans, we have the Gantt chart. So this is a visual roadmap of upcoming milestones. This includes all of the technical details that need to be incorporated into Witnet Rust. And when they're merged, it also includes the timeline for when we're going to have the public testnet and what needs to be accomplished before we can run that public testnet. Also, we're still in the phase of exactly planning how that looks. As far as what we want to achieve with the testnet phase, there are some things that we can test that we don't need a public testnet for. It can just be a private testnet. But there's definitely some things that can only be tested at scale, right? So like if we're running all of the nodes on the same machine, the latency between them is very low. So there's some things that need to be tested in public in like a more mature environment, I guess. And now directly on that WIP that is about coin issuance. Its main objective is to increase the efficiency and sustainability of WIT 2. Obviously, proof of stake is better for or having changing the coin issuance away from halvings is better for proof of stake. So a constant block reward of 125 WIT. But yeah, that's still in discussion. None of this is actually set yet. Reduction of block time from 45 seconds to 22.5. I don't think we can have the 0.5 actually because of some limitation within Rust. But 20 seconds might be a good one. And the motivations behind this is the minor incentive, but also to have a better experience for the users, right? And of course, community driven. There's the discussion on GitHub. Even before it was a WIP, there was quite a bit of discussion going on about what it should look like, how proof of stake should be rolled out, and like what we should expect for that. The next steps, as I mentioned before, we need to decide on an issuance model when we launch proof of stake, but in the long term, maybe it's not the best. So we need to see how it performs in the real world and kind of make adjustments as needed to make sure everything is still going smoothly. The incentives are there. We don't have like a big miner exiting, right? If, for example, if there was a halving or something, the incentive might not be there. been quite a few updates with Witnet Solidity, with the request board, randomness, and price feeds. Witnet request board has been refactored to Witnet Oracle. So when you're calling it in your contract, you no longer call request board, you call Witnet Oracle. Also the ability for callbacks within transactions. So this is where you don't need to have like an asynchronous thing to where you need to check if it's been randomized. The contract can return you the value once it's prepared. Also across the board, we have gas optimizations. Yeah, this is a great thing to see, especially and better estimations as well. Like some of these layer 2s can fluctuate wildly on the gas requirements, which can cause how we were doing gas estimation before to have some issues. Yeah, that's been updated. Also, you can now build a request on-chain, a parameterized data request. So you no longer have to build the bytecode and then like launch it in its own contract. You can now like do that directly through the request board, which is a great feature, I think. This allows for like more dynamic requests to be created in a shorter time. With the randomness, we did refactor a couple of methods. Get randomness after is moved to fetch randomness after, right? Just for some clarity. Also, some enhanced reliability. So we have, so like is randomized used to be a reverting thing. So you could get an error, but now it's like non-reverting. Also some gas optimizations there. And the same thing with the price feeds. One of the notable things with the price feeds is that users can force an update to get price feeds on demand. I'm just checking the chat there. Yeah, Rust doesn't do floating point numbers. Okay, so integration stats. The version 2.0 of Witnet Solidity and the Witnet Solidity Bridge have been deployed on Optimism Sepolia, Ethereum Sepolia, and yeah, you're hearing it first here. We have deployed on Base Sepolia. Once it's updated in the Data Feeds Explorer, and we actually list the new chain there, that we can do the announcement, right? So I already have that prepared to announce that Witnet is now integrated on Base. Yeah, and you can see that under the new Base, under the new chains. So if you want to test version 2 of the contracts, and if you remember in the last community call, just like the new Witnet wizard, there's a lot of great things to test with that. Yeah, and we can get onto some protocols, right? Pool Together is a big one. They're launching their version 5 of their contracts, which is like a single prize pool with multiple assets. Anyone can launch their own prize vault. It's like a big upgrade from their last version, and they're switching all of the Chainlink contracts over to Witnet to get the randomness. And part of that, they also are deploying on Base. First, they're deploying on Optimism, which is why Optimism Sepolia was the first one that we released the version 2 contracts for. They did have like a message in the Pool Together governance thing announcing this maybe like a few weeks ago. That they're waiting for version 2 of the contracts, and that they will be using Witnet. Also, we have that updated listing on Reef. So Reef has like a new partner that lists all of the projects that are on Reef. And we just updated our listing on that page, which led to a couple of permissionless integrations. One is using randomness for like a lottery thing. And another one is using just the public price feeds that we already have on Reef, which is great. It's great to see these permissionless integrations. One of the issues is that it could be hard to track and like actually get them listed on like DeFi Llama, for example, to contribute to our TVS. Network stats in the past 30 days. We can see we have 294 data feeds live. on 60 networks across 28 chains. 48,216 data request updates. Now these are just what is supported by the Witnet Foundation, right? So everything that is on the Data Feeds Explorer is listed here. Something to note is that these are just that, right? So any other requests like this also doesn't include the randomness requests, which are coming in all the time from a bunch of different chains. So this number is actually a bit higher, and it doesn't include just like the general purpose oracle. So if someone has a custom data request that they're fetching some information, those numbers aren't included here either. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. Just like short and sweet. Any questions or feedback? Maybe I can look at the chat here and see. Any updates on cross-chain transfers? Petra asks. So we can do cross-chain data requests. It's different than cross-chain transfers. The messaging bridge that Witnet has is not like a bridge to transfer funds. It's just a messaging bridge between the Witnet chain and the chain that we're deployed on. So you can resolve a data request, for example, on Ethereum mainnet, and then you can retrieve that answer on another chain. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was cross-chain data requests. We don't have like a funds bridge or anything. That almost sounds like what you're saying is one is usable and one is not. Yeah, and I am. Khalifa asks, being an investor, compare like Chainlink to Witnet. Like we can't really give investment advice. And I think I shared with you the link in the Telegram, the comparison between Chainlink and Witnet, right? Like they're two completely different projects. Witnet is completely permissionless and decentralized. Chainlink is not. There's a bunch of differences. Maybe those differences aren't important for some users, protocols launching, and which oracle did they choose. It is interesting because one of the benefits of Witnet is since we run our own layer 1, we can move quickly and integrate on newer chains faster. With Chainlink, they would need to, for example, wrap the Chainlink token and bridge it over to the new environment, so we can move a bit quicker than Chainlink. Yeah, there's a bunch of differences. I think I shared the link if you want to check that out and kind of do your own research. Yeah, and as Adon mentions, once staking goes live, there will be like a very stable APY that you can stake and get some return on, regardless of the underlying asset, right? And also, the more stakers, the more secure the network is. Yeah, I'm just catching up on the conversation here. Oh, okay. So Petrov is referring to something like the Chainlink CCIP. Yeah, I think Adon covered it pretty clear. It's possible, but also, as Dr. CPU mentions, someone would actually need to build that tool that uses Witnet as more of like a general purpose oracle. Yeah, and querying the chain state on one chain and referring that to another is definitely possible. So there's a bunch of different use cases for that. Nice. Yeah, so we got it right. Yeah, and going back, that's to the cross-chain data request that you can query the state of a contract on another chain, which would allow for a use case like this. Yeah, so to burn on one chain and to mint on another, it doesn't necessarily mean that like the funds are transferred over Witnet, but it's secured by Witnet. Cross-chain governance is like Aave doing CCIP. That's funny. Yeah, that's a great point. Like a lot of times talking to some projects, maybe how centralized their Oracle is not really a concern. They just want to get the answer. They just want to have their product work and support their users, and maybe they don't care about the centralization. Right, with more simple words. Yeah, great point, Dr. CPU. That is a great selling point, but also we need to look at other attractors for people. One of the things is this new issuance width and reducing the block time. This will reduce the latency for data requests, right? So for users, that is more attractive, and we can kind of play off of that. I'm Khalifa asks, how soon can we expect POS? Yeah, so as I mentioned before, we now have a Gantt chart that outlines all of that information. Let me actually pull it up here and I can share that with you and we can look at that chart. Just let me switch my screen here real quick. All right, you guys see my screen? Yeah, Gantt chart is like a project management thing. It's fun. I love Gantt charts. Yeah, so this goes through some more technical details on what actually needs to be completed before we can go live with WIT 2. And also this includes the testnet. So some key takeaways here is the public testnet would probably go from May 23rd to June 24th. We'll probably do about 3 rounds of testing where we will actually set up the network, allow people to stake, and see if we get enough stake to have a network, right? Copy signaling would probably start on June 26th if we're looking at this. Yeah, and then on probably August 19th, more than 300 million WIT are staked, WIT 2 will be activated. But yeah, there's the copy signaling and all of that as well. And if you want, I can zoom in on any part of this. I'll share this. So by September, we can expect. Yeah, if you look at the chart, it kind of all depends on if the first round of CAPI passes, then this is the timeline we're looking at. It could be another couple of weeks if CAPI doesn't pass the first round. Right, yes. So WIT 2 is locked in. After TOPI voting, you can start actually staking. And the idea is that people start staking and we build up some stake and then we transition over the consensus mechanism. once enough stake is there. $300 million is the cutoff we'll use. Yeah, it's just kind of a preliminary number. We've discussed maybe 200 million, 300 million. It's not set. Maybe that's something we'll discover in the public testnet. Yeah, and this Gantt chart is obviously a bit more technical with all of the technical milestones that need to be met before the next one can proceed. This will be worked into like a more visual friendly timeline and roadmap with the new branding and everything. Yeah, stake wits are not wits on the market. And when we look at other proof of stake protocols and how much of the circulating supply is staked, that kind of does take it off the market, right? So they're not for sale tokens, they're tokens that are staked, which is interesting. So that lowers the circulating supply. So if there's less tokens and higher demand, yeah, price can do things. And realistically, like when looking at other proof of stake protocols, they typically maybe have anywhere from like less than 50% of circulating supply. Some have 20%, some have 15. It just kind of depends on the model that they use, I guess. Petra asks, are we going to have an unstake period? Yeah, there is some discussion about that. Don, do you have any insight? Maybe it was 2 weeks, I'm not sure. Maybe that's still up for debate. Yeah, as Dr. CPU mentions, there's a couple of options: a queue-like system, or what Adon is thinking, having simple X days to unstake, right? Like 2 weeks to unstake, or a week, or something like that. Almost 90% staked for the tensor. That's not a layer one, right? Like that's just a contract, right? So it's not like securing the consensus mechanism, but it's just like pure rewards, I think. Yeah, I mean, like staking in a contract is different than like staking for network consensus. The hottest kid on the block for Alwins. Okay. I mean, if it's such a new chain and 90% is staked, it's probably like coming all from the creators of BitTensor. Or like a majority of it. It sounds like if it's so new, like how do they have that much staked already? And looking at other proof of stake ecosystems that have matured and it launched fair proof of work blockchain. Okay, yeah, that's interesting. I'll need to do some research into that. But for protocols that have had proof of stake for multiple years, the amount staked kind of levels out at some point. So yeah, it's the new hotness, 90% staked, great, but maybe that will level off at some point when the incentives dry up. Yeah, and maybe I think a key point about setting a time for unstaking is if portions of the stake are released, then maybe the stability or the security of the network fluctuates more frequently than would be ideal, I guess. And the Gantt chart I'm showing, we can share in the chat here. Yeah, enough about the tensor. It's kind of funny. I get it now that you mentioned the AI thing, like TensorFlow. Like I get where they got the name. Were there any more questions about the slides that I shared earlier? About any of the development, maybe some discussion about the coin issuance whip? Nice. Okay. So Petra doesn't have any more questions. Yeah, I also see Rob's in the chat. Yeah, great to see you, Rob. Do you have any questions or anything? If not, maybe we can conclude the call.